diplomats. I hope you're all doing good and are safe at your home and wherever you're situated. So today in this video we're going to discuss a very old topic but yet a dynamic topic that keeps appearing in the news is about the India's appeal or India's aspiration to be part of the permanent member of the UN Security Council. So that's in the news again. So now before in this video today we are going to discuss what is UN Security Council, what are its functions, why it is important, and most importantly, what has been India's record in terms of being a non-permanent member, and why India is aspiring to become the permanent member of United Nations Security Council. So on that note, let's start this video of what is uh, United Nations Security Council. I'm sorry. So UNSC. So we, for the convenience sake, we are going to call it United Nations Security Council. That is UNSC. So what is UNSC? UNSC is one of the principal organs of United Nations. We have 6 principal organs. 1 is the General Assembly. 2 is the Economic and Social Council. 3 is the Trusteeship Council. 4 is the International Court of Justice. 5 is the Secretariat. 6 is the UNSC, that is United Nations Security Council. United Nations Security Council is headquartered in New York, and we all know that UN was established in 1945. So now, apart from the other organs, why that UNSC is so important and why it has more relevance, so to say. So fundamentally, it's for 2 reasons. One reason is that the Security Council has a primary responsibility for maintenance of international peace and security, and most importantly, the resolutions of UNSC are binding. This is another, it's a dual important that it has, that it is responsible for maintenance of peace and order and the international stability, and also it the resolutions are binding. When we say something is binding, it means naturally it has more power to demand accountability from the players on whom it is binding. Hence, all the more importance of UNSC is now we can recognize that. So now who are part of it? UNSC has 15 members. We have 5 traditional permanent members and 10 non-permanent rotating members. So now who are these 5 members? United States of America, United Kingdom, China, France, and Russia. These are the 5 nations who are permanent members of UNSC. And the other 10 non-permanent members, they keep their membership to the council happens on a rotation basis, and they have certain criteria. So now the entire why we're discussing this and presently why is in news is India is going to be the non-permanent member, and this is a 8th significant time. So that's the reason we have all the more urgency to learn about it and to know why, to what extent it will help India. So now these 5 members, like you said, we have permanent members, we have non-permanent members. So the 5 permanent members have a veto power. That means they all have power to veto a resolution or veto a principle, veto any kind of action that UNSC tries to take. Apart from this, the non-permanent members also have a veto, but it's called a collective veto, right? So that's where the difference lies. So every member of the council, including the non-permanent members, also assumes the presidency of the council every month. I think this could be a very important prelims bit. Only permanent members of the council are allowed to become the president of the council. That is true. That is not true. Even non-permanent members of the council can be the presidents of UNSC on rotation basis per month in an alphabetical order. I think this is where the factual part of the UNSC comes into play, which most of us tend to ignore. So the presidency is determined in an alphabetical order. Apart from this, under the Charter of the United Nations, all member states are obligated to comply with the Security Council decisions. That's one of the reasons initially I said that it's powerful, because its decisions are binding on the member states, not just on the member state but everybody. So Security Council actually takes the lead in determining the existence of a threat to the peace or an act of aggression. So UN Security Council prerogatively on its own, suo motu on its own, can take the cognizance of any threat or any kind of aggression that's happening in the world, anywhere in the world. And most importantly, it actually calls, so when you say that it has power to call upon people and tell and recognize the existence of threat, but naturally it also has power to actually bring the parties to the negotiating table and settle peace. So that's another important obvious power. So it roughly reads, this is from the UN Security Council website, it calls upon the parties to a dispute to settle it by peaceful means and recommends method of adjustments or the terms of the settlement. So it is basically a powerful negotiating body that helps to mitigate the conflict between the member nations. And other, in some cases, actually, Security Council can resort to imposing sanctions or even authorize the use of force to maintain or to restore international peace and security. The one most important thing in international relations or in world politics is the utmost thing that we all want to cherish as an ideal is peace. So to establish peace, it's important to actually bring in sanctions. You've seen last year the North Korea, USA are in loggerheads. You also see USA coming out of Iran nuclear deal. You also see other countries fighting with each other. It could be border issue, bombing. It could be the proxy wars that are happening in West Asia. So there are plenty of examples of wherever the UN as United Nations Security Council feels that there is a tangible, imminent threat to the peace and threat to the stability is happening, there it can actually summon the parties and actually bring in sanctions on those parties. This is one of the important functions of United Nations Security Council. And apart from this, it has certain following other functions too, like to take military action against the aggressor, the one who starts the entire conflict and tries to create a problem. It recommends the admission of new members, to exercise trusteeship functions of United Nations in strategic areas. So that's what United Nations Security Council does. And most importantly, to recommend the General Assembly. And what does it recommend? It recommends the appointment of the Secretary General. I think that's one of the important functions. And together with the Assembly. So General Assembly also votes, but however, I think UNSC also has an important role in the appointment of Secretary General. Apart from that, it also has a power to elect the judges of International Court of Justice. So hence that is the importance of UNSC and the structure of United Nations Security Council. Now India, its aspiration to become the member of UNSC, why and how and what happened now. India has cleared an important quest to become a non-permanent member of United Nations Security Council. UNGA actually will vote. The United Nations General Assembly will vote for 5 seats, and we actually had to minimum of 129 countries supporting us. Unfortunately, with the kind of goodwill that India as a democracy has in the world politics, has got an overwhelming majority, and it was a cakewalk for India to attain that non-permanent seat in United Nations Security Council. So the last UN membership that India held was in 2011 and 12, and right now that we are going to have in 2022, it is going to be the 8th term, and this 8th term had come with an overwhelming majority. So basically, how this election of non-permanent members to UNSC happens is it happens on rotation basis. However, according to that rotation basis, India was supposed to get its non-permanent membership to UNSC only in 2030s. But Afghanistan did give their chance to India because we built such social and very matured relationships with Afghanistan. So Afghanistan did this in terms of a written favor for that India's contribution to their country's peace and stability. 2022 is actually a very sentimental year for India for obvious reason that it is our 75th independence year. So it is going to be a milestone for India's trajectory of its growth and also establishing itself as a resilient economy in the world politics. Apart from that, UNSC India joining UNSC in that particular year on the 75th Independence Day, 75th Independence Year of India holds a special place in all of our hearts because it will help India to boost his global stature in world politics. So now what should we do? Now that we've got the membership, now that we've known why is it important, what possibly we can do? India from its inception, not just from its inception, during the entire freedom struggle and also post-independence, India has been unequivocally and unilaterally has been supporting every voice that is anti apartheid, anti colonial, and anti human rights. So, India has always stood tall in terms of supporting all kinds of movements across the world where it stood for against all sorts of racism and discrimination. Having continued that legacy, India, through this having eighth time, impeccably having a record of eighth time being a non-permanent member of United Nations Security Council, it will help India to build a comprehensive strategy to bring in multiple players to further foster the principle of multilateralism. That is the first and the most important thing that India is aspiring to do. And second thing is, India should not actually do not succumb to the pressure of the powers that are already part of United Nations Security Council. It should actually stop doing certain things like abstaining from votes or not being present at that point in time, because it should actually take considerable stand on principle basis. So this is something that India is aspiring not to do. And most importantly, we have actually the twin challenges in the way world politics are emerging. One is there is rising China, and two, there is also receding USA's hegemonic power in most of the spheres. So balancing these two things, India has all the more responsibility to try to build in consensus to make United Nations much more stronger than ever. So this is one such important thing that India is trying to do in 2022 once with our membership. After this, India, when it's aspiring to build a polycentric, a multilateral world, it's important that India has a very stabilizing and very balancing relationships with most of the countries in the world. So that is something that's important. And if you look at for example, let's take the example of West Asia. The Gulf is in turmoil. Iraq is in problem. Syria is in problem. You all see Yemen, there's a proxy war. There's a problem in Lebanon. The Lebanon is already having a problem, whether it's economic crisis and also the external crisis. So if you take one particular region in the world politics, for example, the West Asia, you see there is increasing volatility in world politics with increasing dynamic players coming in. In that scenario, I think India's membership to such dynamic and such powerful club will actually bring in more power to India so that it can maintain its stance on principle basis. So that's something is very important. And apart from that, I would want to actually quote. I mean, because when you're trying to understand larger theoretical framework of certain things, it's important to invoke certain thinkers. So there's a very important international relations thinker and also the person who has been a part of USA's administration is Henry Kissinger. Actually, Henry Kissinger wrote a book called The World Order. He actually said today's world is in the state of disorder which has never been before. That clearly means there is major scope for most of the countries in the world to actually live up to what they want to do and to actually restructure the existing age old traditional power hierarchies. So that means India, it could be just a non-permanent member of UNSC, but however, it has a huge role to play to actually make huge changes in world politics. This clearly underlines that India's potential, India's goodwill, India's democratic functioning, and India's resilient economic power will actually are going to make huge difference, provided that we work in a very committed, synchronized, and comprehensive manner. So now we have certain statistics. So by 2050, there's this organization called PricewaterhouseCoopers. It said the world in 2050, China will actually be world's largest resilient economic power, and India is going to be the second place. And apart from this, India actually having known what is the potential of India, India should be wary of the fact that India is committed to rules-based order, rules-based principle international order. India is committed for peace and international stability. India is committed for all sorts of peaceful negotiation between any kind of aggression between any parties in world politics. Apart from this, India is trying to pursue an inclusive methodology like being committed to rule of law, constitutionalism, and most importantly, a principle called rational internationalism. So, what is rational internationalism? Example again, and most importantly, diplomats, when you're writing or when you're trying to understand international relations, the only way to make your answers dynamic is giving examples. Because when you write a sentence and when you give an example, you're telling the examiner that you not just know what is happening and what you've mugged up, but you also have a larger comprehensive understanding of the issue. So hence, when I said something called rational internationalism, it means we all know that Chinese aggression in South China Sea. The Permanent Court of Arbitration has clearly given a judgment against China, which is in favor of all the 7 countries in that particular region, saying that Chinese aggression is not acceptable. However, we all also know that China is not paying any heed to the kind of judgment that is being given by Permanent Court of Arbitration. This means rationally in international politics, China has been showing utmost disregard for certain international principles as all countries are following. So in that situations, whether it could be South China Sea, whether it could be the present crisis that is happening in the East Mediterranean between Greece and Turkey and Cyprus, this is another example. People who are following current affairs and news would trouble to understand this better. So in this varied examples, it's important that we are committed to certain principles. So hence the principle called rational internationalism is something that India is trying to aspire. And other important thing is in India having a troubled partner like Pakistan and also being close proximity with West Asia and also countries like Afghanistan, we are at a brunt of an activity called terrorism. It's actually blot on peace and stability of every country and every country's endeavor. So in this scenario, India is committed to have zero tolerance to all sorts of terrorist activity across the world. So India wants to actually bring in harmonized relationships with most of the countries because it realizes that harmony and peace are sine qua non for global problems like terrorism, climate change, nuclear disarmament, and trade and development. Hence, India is committed to that principle. Apart from this, for example, what could India can possibly do? India can actually take part in United Nations Security Council's Military Staff Committee, which was never set into motion following the UN's inception. So what can India possibly do? We might just think traditional points of peace and stability, international harmony, climate change. But apart from this, we also have certain specific point like military staff committee. India could actually make such committees work into function and start greasing those wheels so that we can make tangible changes and gains in terms of bringing in larger community to and getting their attention to utmost issues that are happening and bothering every nation in the world. And most importantly, like I've said again and again and reiterating the same fact throughout the entire video, that multilateralism is an ethic virtue that India is best at practicing it. So multilateralism is a way forward and India will have a strong motive to embrace this multilateralism and polycentrism. Apart from this, we also have sustainable neighborhood relations in our sustainable neighborhood relationship in our subcontinent that actually is strengthening India's power. And most importantly, like we've said, multipolar focus. So what exactly is the problem? So why is that multipolar focus important? One, because of the climate change, the increasing, the two, it could be the tangible implementation of Sustainable Development Goals 2030. We have 17 Sustainable Development Goals. The tension between the world powers are constant rise. The trade war between China and USA, the instability in West Asia, the new issues coming up in the UK and in Europe, and stability of government issues coming up in some of the Eastern European countries, Russia and other its post-Soviet era relationships. So wherever you see, you just take a world atlas and try to randomly close your eyes and point at one place, you would find that there is tangible, dynamic international relationships being at a tense mode. So the frailty of the relationship between the countries is more clear than ever. Hence, multipolar politics would actually work in India's favor. And most importantly, there are proxy wars happening in West Asia, like I mentioned. There is clear-cut problem and tension between USA and America, and rise of China. The problem like some irresponsible irritant powers like North Korea, the military power that the countries are trying to portray, that it can actually determine the economic power is also another problem, and technological warfare. The entire space is being militarized, the space is being weaponized. De-weaponization of space, the new emerging technology like 5G, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and strategies perhaps that we can use in future to actually tackle the problems of humanity. So if we just look at one problem of one issue of UN Security Council and start linking from a specific problem to you move to a universal problem. So most often, most of the aspirants have a huge problem that how do we bring content? How do we make it relevant? How do we make the answer dynamic? There are three ways to do the answer dynamic and content more appealing. Is one, you read the basic things about it. Two, you regularly read your newspaper and update your traditional knowledge with the current affairs and the facts. And three, not all the questions related to international relations are asked at one go in the exam. Roughly you get 4 to 5, right? Not all 4 to 5 related to one topic per se. And most importantly, you have certain traditional topics like climate change, disarmament, nuclear problem, the proxy wars, the trade wars. So you have certain traditional points. So the way you understand the traditional concept in a multiple perspective, that's the best way you can also bring in all those points to write a specific answer. So you specifically address the topic, but you also comprehensively bring in multifacetedness to your answer and to your understanding. That's how you broaden your horizons of learning and also writing, and that's how perhaps the successful candidates have cleared this exam, which really brings them huge sense of joy, not just for the clearing exam but also in terms of gaining knowledge. Right. So hence this entire examples that I'm giving from technology to warfare to the region instability to the various kinds of example is to make you realize and make you walk you through different kinds of veracity of the examples that are perhaps an aspirant can learn and read and write while preparation and for while watching such videos. So having said that, like I said that we are going to focus specifically about multipolar focus. So what is this multipolar focus? So what is going to do? Multipolar focus and multipolarity will help in certain following factors. I would want to roughly put it into 5 to 6 points. One, it will help counter unilateralism. It will actually help counter whether it is rising China or rising USA or rising North Korea or rising any other country. So in a world where most of the countries have different problems and we all want to come together as a collective society, nobody wants a unilateral politics, right? Everybody wants to be in a equally distributed power where everybody can have a voice. We all who can perhaps possibly better articulate concerns about democracy than Indians or India, right? So in that way, multilateralism will actually help us counter unilateral politics. It will actually stop it will actually stop bringing in some sense of Eurocentrism that we all have a hangover of. We have a hangover of post-colonial politics. We also have problem of ethnic Eurocentrism, and it will also protect us from the kind of protectionist agenda that we're all living with. So that's also another advantage. And apart from this, we can actually strengthen certain institutions like World Trade Organization. We can actually bring in the United Nations and organizations related to UN so that it can cater the needs of the other larger international community apart from randomly being dancing to the tunes of United States of America or China for that matter. Apart from that, we can also help in non-discriminatory elimination of weapons. We can collaborate together for protection of environment against global warming. We can come together and bring in solidarity, a collective solidarity in tackling climate change. We can actually safeguard our space and also our planet from weaponization, bringing in plurality and diversity. And most importantly, why I said about plurality and diversity is the Article 2 of United Nations actually provides that state sovereignty and safeguards countries have to actually happen in a peaceful environment. It cannot happen in an environment where there is aggression. And most importantly, respecting multilateral institutions, respecting international institutions, bringing in people to negotiate, bringing in people not to abandon the institutions, but to actually negotiate with those institutions so that every country in the world politics will have a say. And that is the only way to establish international peace, security, and stability. And it's important we also try to normalize and de-escalate tensions between various world powers. It could be Israel, Palestine, it could be China, USA, it could be North Korea, USA, it could be Iran, USA, it could be various players in West Asia, or it could be various intra-ethnic conflicts that the Northern African or the Central African countries are going through. So we have plenty of examples in international relations where we can actually bring in multilateralism as a principle and try to establish peace. And apart from this, the comprehensive agreement on international terrorism, certain delicate judgments that we all want to stand as a country. So there are actually, I think during the course of this entire video, I think I've given more than 10 to 15 examples of how better we can cooperate, collaborate, and actually work together and bring in a larger solidarity. So diplomats, in this video, we have clearly understood what is United Nations Security Council, what are its important functions, where is it situated, what is its significance, who are its members, and what perhaps the members can do, and most importantly, India's election to become a non-permanent member in 2022 consecutively, for the 8th time, is a point of discussion that we have discussing that in the video. So I hope you will recognize why India's membership to UNSC is important and what is its significance for the larger level, so that India can play more mature role in world politics. If you have any doubts, you could feel free to contact us at Viplav IAS. And thank you very much and all the very best. Please stay safe and wear masks.